Hello, and welcome to a reading of Popular Mechanics and a discussion to follow shortly after. The story was written by Raymond Carver. Early that day, the weather turned and the snow was melting into dirty water. Streaks of it ran down from the little shoulder-high window that faced the backyard. Cars slushed by on the street outside where it was getting dark, but it was getting dark on the inside too. He was in the bedroom pushing clothes into a suitcase when she came to the door. "I'm glad you're leaving. I'm glad you're leaving," she said. "Do you hear?" He kept on putting his things into the suitcase. "Son of a bitch, I'm so glad you're leaving." She began to cry. "You can't even look me in the face, can you?" Then she noticed the baby's picture on the bed and picked it up. He looked at her, and she wiped her eyes and stared at him before turning and going back to the living room. "Bring that back," he said. "Just get your things and get out," she said. He did not answer. He fastened the suitcase, put on his coat, looked around the bedroom before turning off the lights. Then he went out to the living room. She stood in the doorway of the little kitchen, holding the baby. "I want the baby," he said. "Are you crazy?" "No, but I want the baby. I'll get someone to come for his things." "You're not touching this baby," she said. The baby had begun to cry, and she uncovered the blanket from around his head. "Oh, oh," she said, looking at the baby. He moved towards her. "For God's sake," she said. She took a step back into the kitchen. "I want the baby. Get out of here." She turned and tried to hold the baby over in the corner behind the stove, but he came up. He reached across the stove and tightened his hands on the baby. "Let go of him," he said. Get away," she cried. The baby was red-faced and screaming. In the scuffle, they knocked down a flower pot that hung behind the stove. He crowded her into the wall then, trying to break the grip. He held on to the baby and pushed with all his weight. "Let go of him," he said. "Don't," she said. "You're hurting the baby," she said. "I'm not hurting the baby," he said. The kitchen window gave no light. In the near dark, he worked on her fisted fingers with one hand, and with the other hand, he gripped the screaming baby up under the arm near the shoulder. She felt her fingers being forced open. She felt the baby going from her. "No!" she screamed, just as her hands came loose. She would have it, this baby. She grabbed for the baby's other arm. She caught the baby around the wrist and leaned back. But he would not let go. He felt the baby slipping out of his hands, and he pulled back very hard. In this manner, the issue was decided. So as you can see from this short story by Raymond Carver, that his use of language, he writes these very short, sweet sentences. And there's really no use of exaggerated language or $10 words. All of his sentences are very clean, very easy to understand. You'll also notice he didn't give any of his characters a name. Why do y'all suppose he did that? In the United States, 50% of all marriages end in divorce, and 70% of all second marriages with a child end in divorce. Perhaps he didn't give the characters a name because he wanted the characters to represent all of us, any one of us who's in a relationship. At the beginning of the story, you notice that she comes in and she's yelling at the man. He's packing his suitcase. And she's telling him, "I'm so glad you're leaving. I'm so glad." And then she sees that he has a picture of the baby. Now, the man wasn't packing the suitcase with the baby's things. He was going to leave. And it's not until she gets that picture that he decides that he also wants the baby. And of course, her response is, "You can't have the baby." Isn't this what happens in divorces all across America? Where you have children who are having to choose between which parent they want to live with, which parent's more suitable. You have judges deciding which parent gets the child. What happens to those kids? How are they used by each of the parents? How long does it take before the father starts telling the child, oh, your mom and her stupid new boyfriend? Or the mother tells the child, oh, your dad and his stupid new girlfriend? How are those children that are caught in the middle of these separations, how are they used for leverage? How are they weaponized to hurt the other person? I think that's what is at the heart of this story. That this child is used to hurt the other person. Maybe some of you all find a similarity between this story and the story in the Bible where two mothers are fighting over a child and they bring it to the king and they lay the child in front of the king and the king says, okay, give me a sword, and you all decide what half of the child you want. And one of the mothers says, I want this half. And the other mother says, no, don't hurt the baby. She can keep it. Just don't hurt the baby. And that's how the king realizes who the true mother is, because the true mother would be the one that does not hurt the child. But in this case, at the very end of the story, we see that neither of the parents are acting like the true parent. The father has the baby gripped up under the arm, the mother has the baby gripped up under the arm, and they're both pulling in opposite directions. What do you all suppose happens to this child? Does it get ripped in half? Do its arms get dislocated? Or do you all think that one of the parents has enough sense to let the child go? See, that's the beauty of good writing, that it doesn't necessarily give you a definitive answer. And the writer is asking for you, the reader, to participate in this story, to create this world with your imagination and to decide what happens to this child. We hope that one of the parents has enough sense to let the child go. But sometimes our minds go into these deeper, darker areas. Maybe some of us didn't see that. Maybe some of us saw this child getting ripped in half. All right. Thank you all for listening, and please continue reading.